Hey guys, welcome to this week's podcast episode. And I've got a fantastic guest for you today, Danielle Harris. And she is a marketing and messaging consultant with expertise in utilizing personal stories and existing information for marketing. So it's going to be a really fascinating discussion, fireside chat on marketing tools, content marketing, changes in online marketing, and using stories. And I'm overall very excited about today's fireside chat. So Danielle, welcome.
Thank you so much for having me. Great to be here.
So this is interesting. I know, there's the book called Story Brand, and people are talking about stories, and people are talking about content marketing. We've got social media. Now we've got AI coming into the picture. So talk about your experience and how you got to be doing what you're doing.
Yeah, so interesting story. I started off in school. I thought I was going to be a doctor. I was like, I'm about to be a doctor. And then I realized actually no, because I had it all planned out. I was going to start off, I was going to do all my pre-med, I was taking all the chemistry classes, all the things, but simultaneously, I was like, I'm just going to be smart because I want to run my own practice. So I'm going to also take business classes as well. So I know exactly what it is that I'm talking about as I'm running my own practice. Then I realized I actually just like the business portion of it so much
Mhm.
more than anything else. Not that I was bad at it, I loved it, but I was just like,
Yeah.
actually, I find this so much more fun. So I started off my career in marketing. I worked for a lot of different, I worked for a lot of different people in the entrepreneur space, but I started off my actual career in the concrete space. And I told people, whatever you do is more interesting than concrete. I was selling books about how to make concrete, codes and standards about concrete. So anything that anybody else does is automatically more interesting than that. And it was from there, and then also working with other entrepreneurs that I realized like, oh, people don't just understand how interesting what it is that they do is. Because I had been able to figure out, okay, I can talk about concrete in a way where it sounds as if it is the most important thing in the world. It's because of concrete, that modern infrastructure, and we're able to transport from one place to another. You couldn't take off on a plane if you didn't have a solid runway to go off of. You wouldn't have dams, you wouldn't have bridges, you wouldn't have all these things without that. That's a fantastic story. So just think about all the other things that people inherently think are way more interesting, what type of stories you can tell about that. And so I realized, like, you know what, there's something there to that. And so I spend a lot of time working with entrepreneurs on trying to come up with how exactly you can talk about your story, your experience in a way that's going to capture people's attention and just be like, "Ooh, yes, I do need that in my life."
Yeah, and it's a wonderful story how you talked about how you were more interested in the business aspect. And I can resonate with that. I was, studying, but in my mind it was always about, making a good living and, kind of that financial success, and just like, being a doctor was just more of a means to an end. So what I love is the content marketing space is really changing. It's got for example, it started out with social media. You could market your brand, but then all these algorithms and bots got in the way, and now it's like, have a community, have a true following, 1,000 true followers, and now we got AI. So where do you see this space of content marketing moving, and where does personal story intersect with that?
The people that honestly get the most interaction, the most engagement are the people that you feel as if I do resonate with their story. I understand them. I like them. They are showing off who they are, what it is that they do, and they show this really innate passion for it. And I think that's where it's starting off at. And so when you are talking about, okay, the algorithm and this, that, and the other, it's really about honestly going back to the true roots of growing a business, the true roots of marketing. And it's talking to a person, talking about what it is that you do, and creating an intense connection. And that always happens through telling a story. So this could be, well, from the content marketing perspective, I'm going to talk about a one time that I interacted with a single person, and you're telling it from a perspective of like, oh, yeah, and other people can connect and relate to that. versus before you're just like, okay, yeah, I got this picture, I'm doing this thing, I'm doing that thing, and just like it's producing content versus taking a step back and thinking, okay, what's the connection point here? What are the things that people are going to be like, oh, yes, I see myself in that, or I know someone that's experienced that same thing. And it's really slowing down a little bit and being very intentional about what's the reason why I'm telling this, sharing this, what are people going to get out of this, and how is this going to create some type of conversation that we can have.
And I love this idea where you talked about creating conversations because I had another podcast guest and his follower count, he's just like follower count is just kind of a vanity metric. It's and then like it's basically like these algorithms they want to promote a lot of just insightful and just very emotionally charged. But if you strategically like you were talking about intentionally like using these platforms, he was using it to create conversation and foster engagement and create connections. So it's like it's really interesting how like, how we think like, someone has like 4 million followers, but they probably know just probably a handful, right? So the
Yeah.
next, yeah, go ahead.
Well, not only that, there are a lot of people that they have a lot of followers, but if they're trying to grow a business or trying to do anything that doesn't necessarily always translate into like people coming in, people interacting. So it's really going back to would you rather have a million followers or $1 million? And so it's really making sure like so those people that are willing to pay you money, what are they looking for? What are they trying to hear from? And how are you connecting? And I want to really think about this in a way of if you were having a one-on-one conversation with someone in real life, what would be some of the things that you would actually talk about and connect with? And you wouldn't just like start like spraying and saying a whole bunch of stuff. Just you would ask engaging questions like, oh, tell me a little bit about yourself. And you would find out what are some commonality points that you each have. And then you'd go down that area. And then you'd get to the point where we're saying, like, oh, well, this is my area of expertise. This is what I know. This is what I do. But we're connecting on these other aspects too. And then you're creating a real connection and real relationship with people. And then when they go off to someplace else and we're just like, oh, yeah, I know somebody that does this. We've had great conversations before in the past. You should be thinking about your online social media presence with that same type of interaction that you would have with a person in a one-on-one basis. And I think a lot of times we think that social media and networking in person are completely different, but there are a lot of the same rules that happen and go on. And I think you have to think about that in those same ways.
Yeah, I love that. How do you see content marketing and social media changing with AI? Because now we have generative AI. For example, now you can create AI generated almost perfect videos from just one text prompt. I think it's Sora. And well, how do you see that? Because then it basically kind of eliminates any need for just human interaction or what are your thoughts about that?
I think that a couple things. Right now, there are places where it does look pretty good, but it still
Yeah.
takes a lot of human finessing to get it right. I think there are a lot of conversations about like how it's potentially regulated and all these other things. But even with things like Chat GPT, if you're just like, I wanted to send out an email to people and I don't have time and I want to put in a prompt to make sure that, it's going out to the people there's still the aspect of you have to give it a good prompt for it to give you a good email. And that still goes along the lines of I need to know about my people. I need to know what my voice is, what my tone is, because one of the telltale signs of, an AI or Chat GPT created something is it uses the word unlock. It uses like there is a whole list of words that I tell Chat GPT please make sure you don't give me a subject line or text or anything that includes like these 5 words. And every single time without fail, they will still always give me those same words. So it's just like knowing what are the words that you're going to have and what's like that clear language that you have versus it looks like ChatGPT and then everybody has ChatGPT. And then you're getting to the space of like, ooh, I want to go and sound original. So like I want to write it myself. So I think it's going to swing in a way where everyone's like, oh, yes, I'm jumping on board with this. And then it's going to go back to like, actually, I kind of do want something that like I have my hand and I want it to feel personalized. So I think it could be a great tool for coming up with ideas. It can be a great tool for deciding like, okay, I need to help brainstorm some things, but I still think you need to have your hand in what comes up, how you're producing it, whether it's you yourself or it's someone that you work with on your team, someone else that you hire. There's still going to be value in you having your hand in that. AI is going to be a good tool. It's going to help you brainstorm and come up with things, but to have it do everything for you, at least the state that it's in right now, it's not it. And people who know will be like, oh, yeah, I know exactly what platform they use because that's the telltale sign.
Yeah. It's very interesting because I go to ChatGPT now to more than I go to Google
Hmm.
because because it can integrate a lot of the things I'm asking. The only problem with ChatGPT is there's so much you have to do to get to that prompt where Google you
Hmm.
just pull it up. So I think if they can fix that, I think they've already achieved scale for ChatGPT. But one thing I have a question about is, do you ever see because you talk about the non-negotiables in a personal story, and you ever see if AI is able to replicate personal stories, basically, because personal stories are not scalable because they're very like it takes a lot, each. But you ever see AI being able to create personal stories and then automate and then scale and then leverage that at scale, like basically create these awesome stories and content using AI, but making it very relevant. And do you ever see that happening?
I've seen people being able to put in aspects of their own story, but again, you have to be able to pull out and give it prompts. And I think a lot of times people actually struggle with what are the important and relevant prompts and things and aspects of their own story that would make it good and compelling. Because what ends up happening is that it ends up looking like a resume and it's like your LinkedIn page, and that's not exactly your story. There are so many other things, which is why it's so helpful for you to be able to pull things out and be able to say, like, oh, that's something that's interesting right there. Give me more. And I think that's one of the failings right now of it's not asking you a lot of questions of say like, hey, tell me more about like this aspect over here, because that's not how it's being prompted to be used. Now, it could be a case where you work with someone to pull out those aspects and they know, like, oh, a lot of times if someone says this thing over here, they're probably minimizing the importance of this. I remember I had a client and she was telling me about like, oh yeah, like I'm adaptable to change. Because I moved over here and I moved over there, and there was that time that I moved to Tanzania, and I was like, wait, you moved to Tanzania? And that was very relevant to some of the other work that she was doing, but she was really ready to just gloss over all of that. And I don't think AI is in a position to backtrack and say, tell me more about this, and let's pull out stories and aspects about that that's going to be relevant to the people that you work with. So I think that's just going to be one of those things that until it gets to a place where you have Star Trek level interactive AI holograms that can do all that type of stuff, I think there's still a place for people being able to say like, okay, I need to sit down with a person that can help me pull out and craft something. And then once you get to that space, there is absolutely a way that AI, Cat, GPT, whatever, once you have like core elements of a story, input it into that platform and then be able to create other elements, whether it's a pitch for you to be on a podcast, or if you want to create a quick bio about something, if you wanted to go speak on a panel or something. But at the same time, it does require you actually knowing what your story is. And a lot of times, the prompts and the things that AI have right now, they just aren't to the level where they can really dig in the way that is needed.
And I think I do see, because AI is getting better and better, and it's almost like because it's technology built on technology, so it's kind of like you've got this Moore's exponential S curve, so it achieves scale much faster, but it still has a long way to go to
Yeah.
to replace
I'm
human.
not anti I'm not anti-AI. let's put make that clear right now. Like that can make a whole lot of things easier, especially where you're working on things where it's just like it's not that deep. Like I just need something to be put in and pulled out. But when it comes to something that's like very foundational, I don't think it's fully there yet. Or if it is, it takes a lot of specific prompting and nudging and adjusting and things of that nature that I
Yeah,
just don't think is quite there yet. But it's an awesome tool. Use the
yeah,
tools that are available to you.
yeah. Then that kind of rounding it out, what I found interesting is this innovative use of existing information. And talk about this you describing a creative approach for repurposing existing content or information that many businesses overlook but could significantly enhance their marketing effectiveness.
Yeah, so I notice a lot of times, so a lot of the groups that I work with, they primarily are in the online space, but this is honestly relevant for any and everyone using a business. There are usually key metrics that you're typically looking at. You're looking at, okay, here, how many people I've worked with, how many dollars I'm brought in. Here is the busiest time of the year, here's the slowest time of the year. And you're looking at that same information. But a lot of times there's even more that you're collecting on an ongoing basis where you're just like, oh yeah, I work with X amount of people, they're this age or this thing, that the other, whatever it is. And a lot of times from the onset of I'm bringing on this new patient, this new client, this new whatever, and you're not realizing that that information is just as important. So if you're realizing that actually most of the people that I work with, they are women between the ages of 35 and 45, and they tend to all live in the same area and they tend to all like do these other things. What are you doing with that information to make a bigger impact on them? Try to find more people who are like them using the information that you already have. So I'll talk about a client that I have. She works with people who are trying to find new careers. And one of the things that she realized after looking over her intake forms and the forms that she has people fill out just throughout their job process is that most of them were mothers. But she never used that information in any of her marketing about how it's going to be helpful for people who are mothers, who are looking to be mothers soon, all of that things. Like that was a core aspect of things that she was completely missing out on, but it was the information that she had already collected. It was something that she had access to, but
Mhm.
without going back over through that information, she wouldn't have realized like, oh, there's a whole new angle that I can be talking about. And how many people could I have additionally brought in if only I had talked to those particular things in my marketing, in my messaging, in my storytelling?
Yeah, I love that. How can people find you and follow you, check out your work, and so on?
Yeah, so I have a podcast myself. It is called Marketing That Works with Danielle R. Harris, and you can find that wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. You can find me on Instagram at danielle.r.harris. You can also find me on LinkedIn as well. Again, Danielle R. Harris. And if you are more interested in just like, I want to learn a little bit more about her, what does she have to offer? You can sign up for my email list at drharrisconsulting.com/stories. Sign up for my email list. And I talk there about how you can work with me one-on-one in my marketing and messaging program, where I talk about storytelling. I talk about using the information that you already have to create compelling marketing.
And for all the audience out there, let's thank Danielle for coming on and be sure to give her socials a like and follow. And thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you for having me.